The Bobby O Show.
Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O. Potzner, and I'm here today for the second day in a row with a fantastic show. I've got a young lawyer who's an athlete, and remember from yesterday's show I did a show about an athlete who transferred from University of Maine to play basketball at St. Joseph's in Pennsylvania. This young lady played in Providence College. She's also a phenomenal lawyer. Her name is Marissa Bigelli. I'm sorry I spelled it wrong already. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you on here. Let me just give you a little bit, folks, of the background of Marissa, and then I'm going to have her talk about herself. Marissa is a partner at Reich & Truex, PLLC. It's a boutique family law firm in Southport, Connecticut. She focuses her practice on family law, including areas of divorce, custody, child support, juvenile matters, and premarital post-nuptial drafting and litigation. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. She is certified by the state of Connecticut as a guardian ad litem. You'll explain that in a few moments what that means. As an attorney for the minor child or children, and serves as a special master in multiple jurisdictions in Connecticut, completing the 40-hour training certification as well. She is a certified mediator. Does she ever sleep, I wonder? Working with families in a mediation setting to achieve a final resolution. She's been recognized as a super lawyer. I'm honored. Super lawyer, rising star. And because she's a little older than she was a few years ago, you're now a super lawyer beyond rising star.
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately, you want to be the rising star, but not older, I'm sure, right? She's a member of the Connecticut Bar Association and the executive committee, as am I, on the family law section. She is co-chair of the marital property section for the family law section of the American Bar Association and an active member of the section. Her memberships also include the Fairfield County Bar Association, the Milford Bar Association, the Bridgeport Bar Association, and the Rhode Island Bar Association. Wow. Now let's go to what you really do.
Yeah.
That is an amazing background. So now I want you
Thank
to
you.
tell me in a few words exactly who you are that I haven't mentioned so far. And we're going to get into some more details a little bit, but go ahead. Tell
Okay.
us about Marissa.
Okay, so the real Marissa, I'm from Rhode Island originally, and I think that's really important because Rhode Islanders are it's a close-knit, it's a community more so than a state. And when I came out to Connecticut back in 2006, I felt like Connecticut was the largest state out there, but it's getting smaller now. I'm from a big Italian family, so my Italian heritage really is a big part of me. And yeah, I mean, the law is definitely a big part of it too, but I think my family, my Italian heritage, my Rhode Island roots kind of all make me who I am.
I think I have three of my favorite female lawyers in the state are from Rhode Island. There's you,
Yep.
Deb Noonan.
Is she from Rhode Island? I didn't know she was.
I thought she was from Rhode
Okay.
Island. And Aiden Welch.
Yep. Love Aiden.
Hey, we got those tips in for you guys. Keep those cards and letters coming. So tell me a little bit about, and we're going to get into the law because you were at a great seminar you were the producer and presenter of. We'll do that a little bit later in the show, but tell me a little bit about when you're growing up, you mentioned your Italian family is very important to you and your heritage. Why is that, and tell me about that.
Sure. Well, so my dad was first generation, or my family, so I am second generation. From everyone's over from Italy, but I think part of it too is Rhode Island has a lot of Italian culture. So much so, you don't realize it until you leave Rhode Island that every state doesn't have that much Rhode Island culture. But I think part of being Italian was just the Sunday meals, having your family around all the time. My parents knew each other for a long time, but their families knew each other. So it was never a mom's side of the family, a dad's side of the family. Everyone just kind of merged into one. So meals, holidays, everything was just one family. Instead of we're going to mom's side, we're going to dad's side. So I kind of grew up with just one family. And food is a huge part of it. And for me, food still remains a huge part of it. I love food. I love to cook. So
Do you like to eat also?
I love to eat. I love to eat.
Okay.
A lot of Italian food, but I diversify. I go a lot of places. So I think just that close-knit culture kind of instilled in me certain values and my work ethics and stuff to that effect.
I'm Jewish, and Jewish people are known to be very similar. I hate to be stereotypical, but Jews and Italians are very similar because we're all emotional a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're not emotional at all.
Not
Never.
in the least
Not in the
bit.
least. That's right. So just don't hit me today. And family's important, and food is important.
Yeah.
And so we're very close-knit in that regard. In fact, I could tell you a funny story. Maybe I shouldn't tell the story. I'll hold it for later in the show. About when I dated an Italian girl when I was in high school, and her mother was very Italian. I think I was a senior and she was a freshman or sophomore. I went to pick her up for our first date, and her mother said, "You're touching my daughter, I'm gonna break your blanket neck."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay." I had her home at 9 o'clock. It was fine.
Yeah.
It was fine. And you said cooking's important. By the way, before you do that, I went to my nephew's destination wedding in the September of 2024 it was. And it was in Rome. And we made it into like a 2-week trip. And have you ever been to Sorrento?
I have not.
Oh man, Sorrento, I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
The hotels were beyond expensive, but you know, what are you gonna do? You live once, right?
Yeah.
And I got upgraded to like the most expensive room on the water, like top floor.
Nice.
It was, and if you ever go to, you'll go to Italy, I'm sure a lot more times, but Sorrento was just absolutely phenomenal. And I enjoy my stay in Italy.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, you can't go wrong with Italy. I love Italy. And Rome is fantastic too.
We took a train, I forget from which city to where we went, maybe Naples, whatever, for like a 3-hour trip. And I was on the train with a lady who was from Germany, but she was assigned to the embassy in Italy. And it was, as I said, 2024 before the election, and we had some conversations. And the Americans were not in great favor, shall we say, at that point in time. We got to do a lot to mend fences. I really believe that. Do you follow the political activities a lot, or not really?
Somewhat. You know, I follow. I try not to as much. Definitely not as, we have a lot of politics in our office, so I tend to be the quieter one when we start talking politics. But I do follow them.
But you should raise the bar a little higher on being quiet, because Veronica Reich is in your firm.
She is.
And Veronica's been on my show probably 5 or 6 times, sometimes from Israel, whatever. And if you've watched any of the shows, she can be emotional, but I love her dearly.
Yeah.
But she sat in that seat, and she's even yelled at me a couple times.
I
Believe it or not.
Oh, I believe it. Believe me,
Yeah.
I've been on, we have 9 o'clock morning meetings every morning.
Every morning?
Every morning, which we started during COVID, because everyone was all over the place. So
What
it was a way
what
to
kind of food do you have in the morning? Bagels or nothing?
No, well, now it's just kind of check-ins. People are in the car. It's just remote.
Okay.
I wish. I might bring that up, though. That's a good
idea.
That's a good idea. Morning meetings should require food. But sometimes we end up getting into, with Veronica, she does, we talk about political topics such as Israel in the morning meetings. And sometimes 9 o'clock is a little early to have those conversations, but you know, we manage.
And here's the thing, that I'm Jewish, as I said, and she and I have a different perspective on what's going on in Israel. And I let her know that I was unhappy with Bibi, and she let me know what she thought about that. You said your family had Sunday meals. Was it every Sunday, literally?
For the most part. I mean, we're on the go a lot. It's me and my sister. My sister's 3 years younger than me. So between,
So she's 29.
Exactly. 28.
28, okay, thank you.
So between playing sports and, you know, we'd always be going somewhere. But other than that, we would do Sunday meals. And it was either at one of grandparents on either side, or my mom would have them usually. Our house was usually the main family gathering place.
Was there a typical meal for the Sunday, or is it just catch as catch can, or what?
No, it's typically any type of macaroni. So
Any type of
pasta.
macaroni.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, growing up, pasta was always, I call it macaroni, but everyone I think in the world calls it pasta, was always a side dish. So you always had, if you had chicken, you had the pasta. If you had fish, you had pasta. But Sundays were definitely the typical macaroni, meatballs, you know, meat in the gravy. Again, call
Is it gravy or sauce?
I'm from Rhode Island, so we call it gravy, but I've gotten into a lot of debates over that.
I was on the Board of Education in Richmond for many years, and we had a chairman who was from the Jersey area, and she said it's gravy.
Yeah.
It's not sauce. Just to tantalize a little bit, what's the best Italian meal you make?
Ooh. So I do like my meatballs, which I learned from my grandmother.
Do you have beef and pork and veal or just beef?
No, I mix them up. So sometimes, depending, but usually I mix up the veal, the pork, the.
Why do you
all
mix
of
it up? Why do you need all of them in there?
It creates a different flavor. You know, I put the breadcrumbs in it, the cheese, so it creates a different flavor. And sometimes it depends on what you have too. But any type of, you know, obviously I make my own gravy or sauce. I don't allow canned sauces in the house.
I'll remember that if I ever come to your house.
Yeah, don't allow them.
No.
I've bought them a few times in the market and I kind of like hide them when I'm checking out. But so probably any type of macaroni dish. I love making lasagna. I like chicken marsala. I like making that. I think that's a great.
Do you run 10 miles a day? Is that what you do after you eat all this food?
In the morning.
In the morning. I want to ask you, you mentioned how you had a great Italian family as you grew up, and you're obviously a very good lawyer in Connecticut. Did your family background have any influence on the kind of lawyer you are, and if so, what influence?
That's a good question because, quite honestly, I'm like the first lawyer, and I'm certainly the first family lawyer. I think the influence that I had was more on my work ethic and, you know, my education, getting an education, getting out there, building a business, you know, that aspect of it. And wanting to work hard in whatever that I pursued, but yeah, I don't come from a legal background, so some of it's even foreign when I'm explaining it to my family, what I do, especially in family law, because it's so unique and maybe
People
unbiased,
don't understand how family law has such diverse areas we have to know. And I think the best thing about being a good lawyer, in my opinion, as a family lawyer, is knowing what you don't know, what I don't know, and getting help from others. My family background is that we had a bakery business. My grandfather had a bakery, then my father had a bakery. He actually got his CPA degree but didn't like it and wanted to have his own family bakery business. And so, talk about the work ethic, I worked every Saturday night in high school except for 2 Saturday nights. One was Yom Kippur. You better tell that the Veronica should be happy about that. And one, somehow I got a date for the junior prom. I'm not sure how that happened. But other than that, I worked, you know, every Saturday, because the big day was Saturday night to Sunday. And in those days when I was in charge of jelly donuts. And in those days, we didn't have like the fancy machines now. So I was doing this kind of thing. And the thing I learned is work ethic also. And even though people will complain that we may be charging more than maybe charge too much, but the polls say that people usually love their lawyers, but hate every other lawyer. But I learned the value of $1. You probably did in your background. Your father and mother did work, or?
So my father owned a medical. He was a doctor, so he owned a medical business, and my mom stayed at home with us. So she helped run the business. I'll give her that because she definitely did. We were always running somewhere, especially back in the day when you didn't have Amazon. So I remember we'd go to Staples and then CVS and everywhere else. But she stayed home with us.
And so you've learned from your family background, et cetera. In fact, actually, by the way, my father, after he sold his bakery business, he sold to a bank, and we used to say, the joke was he went from dough to dough. He taught at Johnson & Wales College in Rhode Island.
Oh, yeah.
He taught from like age 75 to 85, and he'd go up there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, and whenever we would go to a restaurant with him, he'd always take me into the kitchen. And invariably, they used to call, his name was Milton O'Ponser. They'd say, hey, Chef Milt. You know, and so, but all those kinds of things influence us, and also the value of $1. You know, even though I was starting to say before about how, you know, we're not inexpensive, but we work hard for what we do. But I still remember what it was like for people, you know, who didn't have money. We used to sell donuts when I was the last in the bakery, $1.44 a dozen, 12 cents a piece, right? And there were people who didn't have it. My father used to always, I'll never forget, one Christmas, there was a family who was a poor family, and we brought all kinds of Christmas goodies to their house. And we bought gifts for all the kids, except there was one kid he didn't realize was going to be there. So we had to run out in the snow and find a gift somewhere. We brought back. So I mean, those are things that our family values help us.
It's true.
You know, it makes a difference. Providence College is your college, right? I had my best math teacher, my best teacher in high school was Mr. Gilday, who I had him for Algebra 2 and Calculus. He went to Providence College. And he was very good friends with a guy you may not know, Lenny Wilkins. You know the name?
I do. I mean, I don't know him, but I know the name.
Lenny Wilkins is a great player, right? At Providence College. And so he used to make fun about how they played poker together. He had great love for Providence College, although he used to call it PU. Providence University. So tell me about your experience at Providence. Did you go to college thinking you're going to be a lawyer?
Yes and no. So in high school, I tried a bunch of different things, but I interned.
No beer or no wine or anything like that?
No, of course not. But I interned in the family court system, tried to.
In high school, really?
In high school, I did. We knew some people in the system, so I was able to get in and learn from there and see what I liked and what I didn't like. I also thought maybe I'm going to go, unfortunately not fully medical because I'm not able to be a doctor. I don't like blood, but.
You think liking blood may be an important factor in being a doctor or a medical field?
That and math. And I don't like math either.
You really don't make math, really?
So I knew that was out, but I thought, well, maybe somewhere in the business world, insurance, whatever, something that I had grown up around. So I tried out a few things. So by the time I got to college, I had a sense that I wanted to do law, but I didn't take the political science route because I also wasn't sure about business and what I wanted to do. But in the back of my head, I always wanted to be a family lawyer, but I really.
As a family lawyer?
Yeah, I always did. But I couldn't tell you I couldn't point to one thing as to why.
Well, that's interesting. When I went to college, believe it or not, I was pre-med also. Well, you weren't pre-med.
Right. I wasn't pre-med.
I was pre-med, but I was a poli-sci major, and I went to Yale from Shelton High School, so I was very intimidated. And there's some funny stories I'll tell you offline about some of the stories about. But I was pre-med, but I put off organic chemistry, which is the class that decides what you're going to do. I put off to my junior year. I said, I'm not going to do it until I'm sure. And I had a friend of mine from high school who got very ill. And we spent a lot of time in the summer visiting him in high school, et cetera, in the hospital. And I said, you know what, I don't want to be around sick people all the time. Then I became a family lawyer and I'm around sick lawyers all the time. That's not true, I'm just teasing. But tell me about it. You played varsity sports at Providence. I wanted to get into a little bit about, you see my Duke paraphernalia.
I do,
but you played a sport, and yesterday I had a guy who's a very good athlete, a good student athlete. How good a tennis player were you? You're tall. You're probably at the net all the time in doubles.
I was.
Did you wear high heels when you played net? Or
yeah,
not?
I wish. No. I mean, I think I was a decent tennis player. I certainly wasn't. So one of my best friends from college, she played number one. So she was always up at the top of that playing the singles. But I was good enough in college that I was able to be active and playing and involved, which I thought was the most important thing for me because being part of a team. I'm still always so used to being part of a team. So being part of a competitive team and tennis, and we got to see so many things. Going to Providence, I stayed in Rhode Island. So I knew I wanted to go to PC. My dad went to Providence.
Oh, really? Okay.
And we were big basketball fans. So I grew up going to every game as a kid.
Oh, so you knew Lenny Wilkins from your dad.
So yeah. So I grew up, I had all the jerseys, the whole. All of it.
Ernie DiGregorio was probably a favorite of yours. Italian, yes. Italian kid.
So
Gary Bello from Woodbridge, Connecticut.
Yeah.
He was from Woodbridge. He was a very good ball player.
Yeah.
In fact, my first Final Four I went to, Providence. Who was the coach in 1987 of Providence College?
Oh.
Was it Rick Pitino?
Well, I was just going to say, was it Rick?
Rick Pitino.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
Providence, Syracuse, Indiana, and one other school was in there, and Providence lost in the semifinals. But it was a lot of fun. So sports were important. Did you travel around? Did PC play? Was it Big East at that point in time?
It was Big East. Yeah, Big East was great.
Yeah.
We did. We traveled around. We got every spring break. We went somewhere. My first spring break, we went to Bermuda, which was very cool. Yes, and we played all just teams that had flown in, and I think we did Florida twice and California once. So
you had a good experience.
A great experience, and my best friends are from the team and people that I met that way. Yeah, it was great. And then of course just seeing different colleges, going to different colleges in the Big East and just experiencing them.
It's ironic because you and I are very similar in a lot of ways. I'm finding out because I went to Yale from Shelton, it's 25 minutes away, and I told my parents I would only go to Yale on one condition, and what was that? You can't come to visit me, and I'm only coming home when this guy from California, who was a friend of mine I met, goes home. When he goes home, I go home. And that was the rule. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. So tell me how playing varsity sports influenced you become a lawyer. Did the things you learned as an athlete help you at all?
Definitely. I think two things. I think teamwork, and I think just the work ethic and just like structure, because that's certainly something I carry through. I was always from the beginning. I mean, I played tennis pretty much my whole life. So I played tennis in high school and in college. And so I was just used to having a schedule and something to plan out every day and being active for myself. You know, at the time I wasn't thinking that way, but now I know it's your mental health. So I think that certainly plays a role in how I look at my day every day and what takes priority and how I plan stuff out, and just the competitive nature. But having it part of a team, so having people to fall back on.
I think a thing also in sports is that you didn't make every shot. You double faulted sometimes. And I think sometimes in the law, you have to realize, and we have to realize, I have to realize, that we're going to always make mistakes. And that, you know, the judge may rule against you, even if the judge is wrong. And you say, why did she or he rule against me?
Yeah.
But you have to pick yourself up.
Yep.
I judged the Connecticut State mock trial competition.
Oh yeah, that must have been fun.
I did it 3 or 4 times up through the semifinals. In fact, I had my show last week with 5 of the members from the Danbury team who are phenomenal, including one lady who's going to Naval Academy. I think I'm doing a show with them next week again. But in any event, the thing that I said to them when they asked me questions, I gave them a chance to ask me a few questions. I'm going to give you that chance later on. And a couple asked about what it takes to be a lawyer and what you should do to be a lawyer. And I mentioned that sometimes people in the competition I judged would make a mistake or not get a ruling, and some people would cower back and not object again. But you got to learn that, you know, and you got to just go back and keep arguing and do what you got to do. And of course, when it's time to close your briefcase, you close your briefcase. If you're up by 30 points, you know, get your starters out so no one gets hurt. If Judge Axelrod, who used to be, I don't know if you went for Judge Axelrod, he was in Danbury mostly.
I know of him, but I never practiced in front of him.
Whenever he said, Attorney Potsner, anything more you want to say in an argument, you knew it's done, no more.
Yep. Yeah.
So you finally became a lawyer. I want to ask you one more thing, by the way. Title IX. Are you familiar with Title IX a little bit?
I am a little bit.
And what's Title IX?
In general?
Yes.
I mean, and it really impacted when I was right before I came into PC, but it's I would say the equality with regard to men's teams, women's teams, and just keeping it equal. I think that's the most basic way to say it. Trying to keep it equal and the laws surrounding how to do that.
Yeah, it's a very important aspect. I think it has been very important the last 10, 20, 30 years, but I'm a little worried where it's going to go, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. So in Providence College, did you find that the Providence men's and women's teams were treated relatively equally, or not?
So when I came in, we were Title IX had really hit Providence. So the men's baseball team had just gone. I want to say maybe the year before I was there, they cut the team because of Title IX, and then they had cut the men's tennis team. So from a tennis perspective, we felt that we weren't on equal footing because we didn't have the men's team to kind of, you know, balance us out a bit. So we definitely, and we heard all the great stories about the men's team and the attention and all of that. So I think we kind of lost a little bit when they cut the men's team.
Do you have any thoughts about transgender activities and transgender people playing sports?
You know, it's a tough situation to go into because I can, and it's still fairly new, I think, with regard to understanding how if there's an impact, what the impact is, and I can see it from both ways. So I try to be really open-minded with regard to hearing it from different sides. You know, I know I know people that have both sides of it, right? That experience it from both transgender side and the opposite to that. So I think it's a real hard topic to, you know, walk through, but it's certainly something that I like to get more information on, you know, and kind of see how it plays out. I definitely think there's a lot going on, and I've been aware of a lot of the situations and what's made media attention and the law and all of that. But it's also like until you're in it, it's hard to speak when you're not, when you're separated from it.
Here's the hard thing. I was on the Board of Ed for 15 years, but my last year on the Board of Ed was early 2000s, maybe 2004 or 5, whatever it was. And these issues started coming up, and it's hard making those kinds of decisions. I don't like the fact, let me put it this way, the Constitution says all men, it should be men and women, but all men are created equal. And the theme is that everybody should be equal. Yeah. And so to me, sexual orientation, whatever, should not make a difference. And that's where the problem comes in, however, because if you have if you have, let's suppose, men playing women's basketball.
Right.
And those are tough issues. And I think we just have to work about it. But I think our country's gotten so focused. I think Trump is a real problem because of executive orders. I don't want to get to political things with you in that regard. But it makes it very hard. And I think we have to think first about why do we have sports? We have sports that Kennedy used to say, President Kennedy always said, physical fitness is important as education. So we have to find a way to accommodate everybody. And that's the hard thing. But when you're on the board of it, make a decision, it's hard to know that. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's hard. You have to accommodate everybody, and there should be a way to do that. I just think things have become very polarizing. So there's only black and white, and regardless of politics, it's just the way everyone is, regardless on what side you're on. So it's hard when you start talking about these topics, like you said. There's so much more to it. What's the facts behind it? What are the science? Things that I don't know. I mean, I know there are claims that if you are, transgender and you're playing man to a woman's sport, I know there's been stuff said that you're at an advantage or a disadvantage, whatever it may be. I just don't have that information.
It's a hard
thing to decide.
It's not an easy thing at all. And in fact, getting that back to the issue we talked before about women's sports and men's sports in Title IX. One fear I have with all the NIL, which is name, image, and likeness, which you're aware of, and we'll talk about that in a few moments, is that the profit motive may become so pervasive in college sports that the so-called minor sports, and by minor sports it's other than men's and women's basketball, football, baseball, and a few other sports like that, lacrosse in some colleges, but if you're cross country, okay, if it's a loss financially, what's going to happen? And the University of Arkansas in the Southeastern Conference, which is one of the two major conferences, or two of the top 5 major conferences, recently the 2 best basketball players probably got $5 million apiece to play, right? They just cut the men's and women's tennis team like Providence did. Why? Because it cost $2.5 or $3 million to run the program, and they only brought in $2,000. And so the problem that we're going to have in our society, and I think it's going to impact Title IX situations, is that what do you do? What do you do when you need so much money for basketball and football and all that stuff, and the minor sports don't matter anymore, and yet people like you playing at Providence College meant a lot. I don't know about your economic situation, but your father had medical practice, so perhaps you would have been able to go to college anyway. What about the kid who has no money? And I had a friend from Arkansas, went to Yale with me. To him, every meal we had was phenomenal. So we have to find a way to help out, which is going to transition for me now to being a lawyer. Tell me about why it is you became a lawyer. You said you had background in your family. Why did you become a lawyer? And you said you want to be a family lawyer. So what was the nexus for that?
Well, I always joke.
How about the proximate cause?
Sure.
The Paulsgraf case. Remember that? Did you ever study the Paulsgraf case?
We can go that way.
That's even though I'm older than she is, we still have the same cases. And when we were in law school, there's something called stare decisis, which means precedent. Nowadays, I guess it doesn't quite mean as much because we have a very aggressive, shall we say, Supreme Court, but let's not go into that. So how'd you decide to become a lawyer? And then we're going to transition into your seminar you were part of.
Okay. Well, I think, again, I tried a bunch of different things, and I joke because during COVID, we stopped being able to go into courts. And I always said, I became a lawyer because I always wanted to go into court and socialize and talk to people and dress up. And so that was my running joke during COVID.
You look very well today.
Thank you. But during COVID, you didn't have to do that. No one saw you, and you couldn't see anybody and talk to anybody. So that was certainly a low point in my career. But for me, it's working with people. I think it's working with people, engaging with all different sorts of people, and also, as you had touched upon in the beginning, it's like the jack of all trades. Like I learned so much, and I have knowledge now. Again, I don't have extreme knowledge on a lot of topics, but I touch upon so many different topics.
She's very, very smart. Don't let her. I went to a seminar recently where she was the speaker. She's a sharp cookie.
But it's an area of the law where you can
I'm teasing.
Into a bunch of different things. I can deal with,
pension. How about
right?
We all the lawyers I know, we ship out our pension parts of a divorce cases to someone. Elizabeth McMahon. I don't know if you use McMahon.
Yes, I do.
She's for QDROs, Qualified Domestic Relations Orders.
Yeah.
She's always involved.
Yeah.
So we know enough to say there's an issue here. We have to get her involved.
Right.
But also, you and I also understand when we're going to court, have a trial, whatever, have to understand the whole theory behind that. I had a 45-day arbitration, which I think the world knew about that one. And we had Elizabeth McMahon as the expert for both sides.
Yeah.
Because she was so good. So you decided that you wanted to become a lawyer, and it was a family law thing situation.
Yep.
And what's interesting to me is that you started out from Providence College, you went to Quinnipiac.
Yes.
When I was in high school, Quinnipiac was a little college.
Yep.
It is now a major university.
Yeah, it really is.
I think sports has helped. I went to Quinnipiac to see the Yale-Quinnipiac basketball game and saw for the first time the huge hockey rink and the huge basketball court. But that's now a major university, and their law school is excellent.
It is, and I'm glad I went there. You know, for me, I went to Quinnipiac because I was in Rhode Island, and I thought to myself, okay, if I don't leave now, I don't know if I'm going to leave. So that 2-hour drive to Quinnipiac was like, okay, just enough. But I ended up loving Quinnipiac, and now I'm still in Connecticut, so I guess, you know, the story goes on. But
you wouldn't have met me if you had gone to Quinnipiac.
Exactly, I wouldn't be here right now.
That's right. So in your let's talk about the seminar you gave, and we'll come back to other topics. I really enjoyed talking to you about different issues that we are raising. You are a member of the American Bar Association, which is, what's the ABA? What's it all about?
So it's the major bar association for the American bar. So it's the whole country for the most part, and they, similar to our local bar, Connecticut Bar Association. Underneath it, there are different divisions or chapters or sections, we call it. So I'm active in the American Bar Association, but specifically with regard to the family law section.
You mentioned the CBA, and there's the DBA. That's the Danbury Bar Association has its involvement. The Connecticut Bar Association, of which you and I are both on the executive committee of the family law section. I'm also on the executive committee of the education law section from a Board of Education experiences. And you're also a member of the American Academy. Tell me about the American Academy.
I am. So I'm a new member of the Academy.
Last Thursday? No.
Yeah, right. Friday. No, since December. So I am
25.
Of 25. So I am a new Academy member. So I just completed my first mid-year meeting back in March. So yeah, it's a great honor for me. I studied for a long time, took the tests. I got to take it with Leslie Jennings-Lax, who's one of my partners at the firm. So she and I were able to study together. We sat for the tests. We did what we had to. It was a long process, but we both made it through the other end. Yeah, and I'm really proud of it.
You should be proud of it.
Yeah.
Which was harder, the bar exam or the academy exam?
I think the academy, only because I'm so aware of what I don't know and how much is out there. And I think when you're young, and I went right from college to law school, I'm still young.
You're very young.
I'm still young, but at that point in time, I was still very young. So I was studying for the bar. I only knew what I needed to know and didn't know there was a whole world out there. You know, now I think this was more intimidating because, especially in law, one thing always leads to another.
How many hours was the exam?
So there are 2 exams. The national test was, I think they gave us 2.5 hours, maybe 2 hours, something around there, to take. And then the state test was essay driven. And we can thank Aiden in part for that, as someone who I believe revamped the test. Yeah. But I took, I want to say, the better part of a day. I want to say it was like from 10 to 5.
I would have said the bar harder, because the bar exam you really couldn't study for, although in my day we took the bar exam course, which was 2 or 3 nights a week or more for several weeks in the summertime. We did it at Fairfield University. But the bar exam, you really don't know what they're going to talk about. And there was a rumor, the bar exam had, there was one day of 6 hours was the Connecticut part, and one day of 6 hours was the multi-state. Yep. And the multi-state questions were impossible, I thought. I don't know how I passed it with a good score, but I did. And but there were so many questions, and I gave myself 1.6 minutes per question, and I literally was keeping track of that. And there's a lawyer named Kathleen O'Sullivan, who you may know. She was downstate where you're practicing law now. She had to sit next to you, Pastor O'Sullivan, and we're at the same table at the hotel in New Haven, and she was.
Oh, geez.
So after about the first 5 minutes, I took my hand and I went, and I said, "Do it again, I'm going to break your hand." We became friends forever. So for the next 30 years,
wow.
we always talked about that. And in fact, we talked before about the COVID impact.
Yeah.
That's the kind that you don't have anymore in the law because we're not
Yeah.
in court any today. But
Right.
we'd go to court, and every time I saw Kathleen, we'd say, "Hey, Bob, how's the hand?" You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you were on the academy, which is an honor because a lot of very good family lawyers do not try for the academy, but a lot of good ones are there. And I think just the fact you got it at your young age, and you are very young, and when you're 80, you'll still look young.
Fair.
Okay. Did I get an award? Do I get
Yes,
points for that?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
But you, as part of the ABA, you gave a seminar, and you were one of the speakers at the seminar with another couple of lawyers. And the topic was a very interesting one called Integrating ADR, which means Alternative Dispute Resolution, into divorce litigation, when and how to use ADR effectively. Now that's very interesting to me, and had I known about it, I would have gone because, as you know, I've transitioned as of April 1 of this year, 26. I went off counsel to my law firm, and
Yes,
I formed my own
congratulations.
firm. Thank you. My own firm called Opatsner Arbitration and Mediation Law PLLC, and so this is very, appropriate for me. I've done those arbitration mediations as the arbitrator and mediator several times a year over the course of the last several years. But I was reading this thing from a different perspective to think about, well, what are you going to teach me today, and what I learned in your book. And of course, the book you says 162 pages, but that's okay. To me, one of the interesting things was talking about the difference between mediation and arbitration, which you kind of got into in your discussion. Tell us about the difference between arbitration and mediation, and P.S. what you're going to talk about doesn't just apply to family law.
Right.
It applies to other kinds of law
Right.
as well. In fact, I'm an arbitrator in several cases now in school districts. So talk to me about arbitration, mediation, and what we should know about that in general.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that I found so interesting, which obviously you are well aware of, is that because my co-speakers were from other parts of the country, and in Connecticut, and it seems to be mostly in the East, we don't have mandatory arbitration, mediation. We're litigating, and we don't. A lot of people go to mediation and or arbitration, and there's these hybrids to it, but it's not mandatory. But it's certainly a resource that I think we're using more appropriately and better now in family law. But to go back to your the question, basically, the mediation is a voluntary process where you are either, I'll do mediations with two parties who have review counsel, which means that they're just coming in on their own, and I'm meeting with them and helping them reach their own resolution. As mediators, we can't tell them or make recommendations specifically, but we can certainly get them to an end. There's also mediation, which you obviously are involved with. Like was that a 45-day arbitration or mediation?
That was an arbitration.
That was an arbitration, okay.
We started as a mediation,
Okay.
it didn't work. But by the way, you mentioned mediation and review counsel. I do review counsel situation,
Yeah.
but there's the mediation that I do and will be doing is each side has a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And let's suppose, for example, there's 5 issues that they can't resolve.
Yep.
They'll come to me with the lawyers, with the attorneys, with the parties rather, and I'll deal with only those particular issues. You do it where you will do it with the parties from scratch one, right?
Yes, I will. Yep, I'm happy. Yeah. Again, not every case is proper for mediation, but especially in that type of situation. But I will do it. And then from the other side of it, I do have mediation coming up where I'm just representing a party. So we're all going in with Judge Solomon and having a full day mediation. I represent
soon
one of the
Bob
parties.
Opatsner,
And that's the next one. Yep.
But it's interesting because let me ask this question. How do you handle a mediation? And it's hard to do, generally speaking, but when you have a situation, and it's invariable at some point in time, the parties will say, one of them will say, I just want to get it done. Just want to get it done. And if you know in your heart of hearts that one person, let's suppose it's a 30-year marriage, and suppose the husband makes $1 million a year, and the wife has been appropriately taking care of the kids and working in other jobs, but she wanted to focus on the kids, not that she didn't have the ability to work otherwise. So he's making $1 million a year, 30-year marriage, and she says, I just want 2 years of alimony. Mm-hmm. And you know in your heart of hearts that that's not fair. And do you sometimes A, walk away from cases like that, and B, if you don't, how do you handle those?
Yeah, so those are always the hardest, I
Yes.
think. I've been in situations like that where I'm the mediator and the parties are representing themselves, and I've pulled the plug or slowed it down to the extent of basically telling them that you need to meet with somebody. You need review counsel. You know as well as I, at the end of the day, if somebody actually says, this is what I want, as long as you know what you're getting into and you're fully educated on the possibilities, then you can't stop the person. But certainly there are situations where kind of pull back on the reins and say, at a minimum, you need review counsel, or maybe mediation isn't appropriate at all.
Yeah, just so people know, review counsel has different meanings, and one type of review counsel is the mediator and the parties have an agreement worked out, the mediator wrote the agreement up, and it's now given to another attorney to look at. And you can review it. There's two types, in my view, of review counsel. One is, and I have different retainer letters that say that, and I prefer one versus the other. One type is, here's our agreement, and the client will tell me what the agreement is, and then I'll read the document to make sure it says what it's supposed to say, and make sure that I answer questions for that person from a perspective of, I'm representing you. But it's very dangerous, because I don't want to be a review counsel who says, you know what, that's a lousy deal, blow it off. Because that's not my role, because you know things that I don't know in the review process. So that, I like to do review counsel where I'm talking to people, and I ask them for their financial affidavits that they have to fill out. I ask them for the analyses, that family law software, which is a program that all lawyers use to figure out the alimony factors, et cetera, et cetera. There's another kind of review counsel that I don't like to do, which is a client will say to me, well, tell me, did I make a good deal?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I won't do those particularly. I mean, I'll tell them, I'll tell them in that case I gave you with the analysis where it's totally ridiculous. Just say, what I'll do is I'll sometimes call the mediator, and I'll say, I've talked to so-and-so, and they asked this question, do you think you might want to talk about your next session a topic to allay the fears? And I've done that with review counsel, with the mediators, and that's the way I like it. Now, as the mediator, do you like that approach?
So I do. I think I agree with you. It's hard, especially when you're review counsel versus mediator. But when I'm mediator, if the parties don't have counsel coming in, even if they're reviewing and behind the scenes, I always encourage them to, because I always think when I'm on the other side, if I'm the attorney and someone's coming in and they're saying, here's my agreement that I just worked on, tell me that it's fair. Well, I'm going to have 1,000,001 questions for the most part, just to protect the person I'm representing. And it's so much easier to get to that point if I've been involved throughout. And I know a lot of people through mediation, it's a money saver. It's trying to be efficient and effective. And I 100% agree with that. But it's hard to jump right in especially at an end of of something that's already been created.
And you don't really know, there could be reasons why.
Exactly.
So that's why the way I approach that is I'll call the actual mediator and say, I got a couple things that I want you to talk about, and just see where it goes. My most recent review counsel situation, I had a terrifically lovely lady, very bright lady, and I gave her all my thoughts, and I probably gave her 10 or 11 thoughts that I had that she might want to think about. And she came back a week or two later and said, Bob, I really like your ideas. Very smart. You're a really bright guy, but I don't want to use them. And then that's fine. And that's just an appropriate way to handle situation.
It's a delicate area, because you don't want to blow something up that people have worked so hard on, and you're coming in at the end, and you don't want to unravel something that potentially is good.
I just sent you a couple weeks ago a review, a mediation case. I don't know if they called you or not.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. There's a few people like you who I really respect. Now I want to go to part of your topic of your conversation at the seminar was why mediation fails. And of all the pages in there, I took that copy and I suppose I should start with, do you sort of up front think about whether a case is appropriate for mediation? We should probably ask that question first, and then I'll ask the question about why does it fail. So when you have a mediation situation, what kind of analysis do you do to decide if that case is appropriate for mediation, the way you do it?
And I think that's exactly it. Is it appropriate for mediation? Now, a lot of cases are, but there are some that aren't. And a lot of that comes down to sometimes personality, and that personality may even just be under pressure. Right? You don't want somebody signing something because they're under pressure, as you said earlier, let's just get this done, or I'll sign because you're tired at the end of the day. So you need to know the personality of your client and the other side so you can figure out if this is going to be successful or not. So I think personality is a huge part of it when I'm initially critiquing it. Also the issues, and who is appropriate to handle those issues. If they're custody issues, what type of mediator do you want? You want somebody who's well equipped to handle the custody side of it, versus if it's more, business oriented or financial. And a lot of our conversation in that seminar was focused on how to make it work and thinking outside the box to make it work. Because on first blush, you might say, maybe mediation isn't great for these parties, but if you start thinking outside the box and say, oh, well, we'll bring in, a mental health professional. I think you were saying that, you were starting to, or you were.
Well, my new group I'm organizing, the group I'm doing for my firm, and it's just me in the firm. I have Jennifer Champagne.
Yeah. Who's great.
Who's
I
great.
love her.
She's a mental health professional,
Yeah.
and I'm going to have her, if there's custody or visitation issues that come up, I'll have her. It could be in a mediation, it can't be in the arbitration process,
Right.
but that's really important. I also like to do consultations. In fact, the person I sent to you a few weeks ago, or whatever it was, I advise that each person have a consultation in advance. You may disagree or not, and that would be a situation where I would do an hour and a half present discussion about how the law works, et cetera, so the person who is going to mediation understands the process better.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a good idea for a lawyer, for a client to have an independent consult first before they see you as the mediator? You can disagree with me, by the way. It's okay.
No, you know what?
Still get your brisket.
It's a good point, because honestly, when we do this every day, we become accustomed to it. And when you take a step back, going into mediation, going into a room with a mediator or two mediators, and maybe you have your experts there and you have all these parties there, you need to know what you're walking into.
Right.
And it can be really intimidating. And I think that's a great idea.
I think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
So when I do review counsel, I like to do that
Yep.
consultation up front, and then the person's turned over to you, for
Yep.
example. I think it's appropriate. It's appropriate for my client who's been sent over to you, who's not my client anymore because she's being in mediation. If she wants to call or he wants to call for a couple of questions, that's fine, but I don't think it's a good idea to have if you have 8 meetings for your mediation, to have the client call me 8 times and say, well, wait a minute, here's what we discussed today, what do you think? Do you think I'm right to say that it's not so good to have in a mediation process that much contact, or disagree?
I think you have to have an understanding, because I think there are definitely, because if you're a review counsel on one side and there's another review counsel, then maybe you're working behind the scenes with permission. So I think it depends on the facts. I agree. Sometimes if you don't know what's going on in the mediation, it's hard to weigh in and give a strong opinion. But similarly, if you have two counsel and you're working through it, it's helpful, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the counsel that I refer to, and I've got a list of many, but
Yeah.
the people I refer to have a good rapport with those people, so
Yeah.
I know they're going to do the right thing and help the person
Yeah.
in the right way. One thing that we haven't mentioned, and we only have less than 10 minutes, this is going very, very fast.
It has.
I'm going to have you back at least 1 or 2 more times if you'll come.
Absolutely.
Only if there's going to be one condition. What's that going to be the condition?
I have to bring food next time.
You got to bring it next time.
I know, I will.
And I'll bring food and fudge, and you can get something. I'm sure you're a chocolate
okay.
girl. I'll bring the
Oh,
fudge.
of course I'm chocolate girl.
Okay, woman, sorry. So there's one thing we didn't talk about, and we got into mediation and arbitration, which we'll get to in a second. There's something called collaborative.
Yep.
I'm trained collaborative. Are you trained in collaborative?
I am not trained in collaborative.
Really? Why didn't you get trained in collaborative? Well, before you do that, collaborative law means there's 2 lawyers and 2 attorneys, and you do most of your discussion outside the courtroom. I'm not going to do the collaborative in my new genre situation, but I think it's a good way to deal with, like, if it's a big case in terms of dollars and cents or whatever. It's a good, and there's a lot of training for that, et cetera. Why didn't you really like collaborative?
It's not that I don't like it, because I think that a certain portion is a collaborative type situation. Now, I'm not trained in collaborative, so I'm not actually doing collaborative, but when you put a mediation together and you have a mental health professional there, or maybe you had an evaluation done of somebody or everybody. So I think there are certain elements of collaborative practice that I certainly bring in to mediation, or working on settlements. But I know the actual collaborative training, I just never did. But now I'm going to have to write that down, and that's next on my list.
You mean I influenced you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I'm really honored that I influenced someone from your firm. Wait a
I'm
second.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Tell
next time,
Veronica. No, I think it's a good program to understand.
Yeah.
And I'm a traditional litigator.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good process to think about as an arrow in your quiver. You
Yeah,
know, that kind
that's
of
fair.
to have
Yep.
something in your background that you can go to.
Yeah.
So let's talk about why mediation. I want to tell you one quick funny story.
Okay.
So collaborative, I had a case several years ago in which my client wanted to go the collaborative route. And when I have a consultation, not someone who wants to just do mediation, but a collaborative, or someone wants to get a divorce and doesn't know the methods. And I usually say there's 3 methods. There's mediation, there's collaborative, and there's traditional. Traditional being you have each side has a lawyer or whatever. Collaborative, you have a different approach.
Okay.
Okay. You and I would probably settle every case. We've never had a case against each other.
No, we haven't.
You know, and I'm disappointed you would have had a couple wins over yourself. Well, we don't believe in wins and losses in divorce cases.
Right, right.
But in the collaborative model, you try to have most of your discussions in offices. You don't go to court that often. But no matter what you do, to get divorced in Connecticut, and every state's law is different, you have to go to court at least twice. And by say go to court, it doesn't have to go physically, but you got to do court paperwork.
Right.
And so we had our collaborative meeting with the 2 parties and the 2 lawyers, myself and another good lawyer. I said, and we had a little chart, and you asked some questions, you know, what are your goals and objectives? Not objectives, but what are your goals, whatever. So I said to the other side, who happened to be a lady, and I said, so tell me, what's your goal in this divorce process? And she said, I want to get all the assets. Looked at the other lawyer, and I said, let me try this again. What do you reasonably want as your goals? And she said, I reasonably want all the assets. So we then stopped the meeting, and we talked, and we ended up settling the case, and we didn't do it collaborative that much. We did it different ways. But the point I'm making is that I think every case can be mediated if the parties are reasonable and have expectations, et cetera, that are reasonable. But if you're going to be unreasonable, it's difficult.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a question that I got permission to ask you about.
Okay.
Am I still have permission for that question?
Sure.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah.
You've been through the divorce process as a divorced woman. And my question to you is, having gone through that process, how has that impacted you as a divorce attorney since then? And I don't mean the different issues in your case. I just mean having gone through that. Did I ask that in a fair, nice way?
Yeah, no, you
Thank
did.
You. I won't get hit for that? Okay.
No, I think, and we were having this conversation, is a lot of what we do is so repetitive, and you know, if a motion comes in, if an accusation is made, if something is done, we're the shield between us and our client. But a lot of times we're not registering the impact on the client. So even though, when I was going through my divorce, even though I knew the final outcome, or not that I knew, but I knew what was going.
You knew the parameters.
I knew the parameters, and I knew when something was coming in. I know when something's nonsense or whatever it may be, but it still hits. So it made me realize, you know, when I forward something over to a client and say, you know, this is nonsense, or don't let it impact you, or whatever, it kind of makes me think, because it does. Even myself, knowing what I would tell myself as a lawyer, it makes me realize that a little more with clients.
Yeah, and also I think along with the lines you're saying is, and I have not been divorced, but if you're in a situation where you know what it feels like to get that motion, a motion, by the way, is a piece of paper filed in court that asks for certain relief. That's what she means by motion. And I have a diverse audience. And you know, you may have a motion someone filed, and I'll give you an example. I had a case in which I represented a lawyer, the other side represented a lawyer. So there's 4 lawyers in the room. Can you imagine 4 lawyers in the room? Oh my God.
Never good.
And my client, they had a dog, and my client wanted the dog. It was very important she get the dog. Some judges won't deal with dogs.
Right.
Judge Winslow wouldn't deal with dogs. But I got her the dog, and then 3 months later, I got a phone call. You know what the phone call was? The vet bills are too expensive.
Yeah.
I don't want the dog anymore. And you have to, you know, the first thought is, gee whiz, why is she doing this? On the other hand, you being through it, and my experience being a lawyer, and you didn't have to go through being divorced to get that, but you know, you might say, gee, it's a crazy thing. On the other hand, to them, it was important.
Right.
I'm sure in your process, something came up. I don't know what, but something came up. And by the way, in our legal system in Connecticut, all your divorce papers are confidential under one condition, and that is, what's the condition? You have agreement. If you don't have agreement, then all your financial statements get opened up, whatever.
Right.
So whatever that issue was that may have come up, it hurt you some way, somehow, and I think you probably learned, even the discussion we had, to say, you know what, I'm more empathetic.
Yeah. It gives you that pause, which is good, because that's what we should have. But like with any profession, you know, you're doing the same thing every day, or not the same thing, but you're going through the same type of situation every day. So you kind of have a blinders onto a bit, or you desensitize to it. You know, I say the same thing when I'm a guardian and I testify. I get nervous about it, even though I'm doing it all the time. So it's
every
a good way.
Every case is different.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that thought. We have 2 minutes left, and I
Okay.
promised you that I'd give you an opportunity to ask me a question, since I asked you a lot of questions. If you
Okay.
want to ask me a question, you can. If
Okay.
you don't
Put
have
me
to.
on the spot.
No,
but-
putting me on the spot. You asked the question.
Well, I was going to ask you about the collaborative, because that is something
Oh,
I'm interested in.
so I read your mind.
Yeah, but I was going to ask you about that. So when you were involved in it and doing it more, I know you said now you're not taking it on as much as part of your practice. Did you see the vast majority coming out of that with settlement, or what was the?
I don't think we had one that didn't settle.
Okay.
And I'll tell you one quick story, and that is that we had I had a collaborative case with the lawyer you mentioned to me offline before we started the show. And one of the parties was very physically ill. We weren't sure how long she was going to make it, whatever. And we brought in an estate attorney, mutual estate attorney, to talk about how you set up assets and things so that you didn't have the assets getting sucked up in her medical care, but giving her income to live with.
Mm-hmm.
This has been, so that's how collaborative did work
Yeah.
appropriately. You're coming back, right? Even you don't have to bring Italian
I'm coming
food.
back. No, I'll bring Italian food.
This has been a really fun show for me to deal with, because you're someone, I called you the Renaissance woman, did I not?
Yeah,
When I
you
said,
did.
and by that I mean you have so many different interests. The next year I go to the trivia contest. You're sitting at my table because you did a lot better on trivia.
I don't
than
know
did.
about that. I'm good at pretending I'm good at trivia.
Okay, but you sit at my table anyway.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah. But anyway, it's been a pleasure knowing you. I've got to know you a lot better, both in the prep and today.
It's been great.
And we're going to have some brisket afterwards,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And I want to thank you for coming on the show. And you are a super lawyer. You're a wonderful lady. And your family in Rhode Island, if I ever got invited to the Sunday meal, if you still have it,
Yes.
I'd come with
Okay.
my Dr. Pepper diet. This has been Babbo Potzer with the wonderful, wonderful Marissa Bigelli.
Bigelli. Yep.
Bigelli. I'll get it right at some point
Eventually.
in time. Thank you very much. This has been Bobby O and the Bobby O Show. Have a great day.